Hey everyone, Tony Vlahos here, Chief Marketing Officer of ExecuNet, and I'm speaking today with Peter Bregman. Peter, of course, is a CEO advisor, leadership consultant, Wall Street Journal best-selling author. I know there's another one coming on the way, and we'll talk about that as well. So Peter, thank you for sharing some time with me today.
As always, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. You work with a lot of CEOs and other leaders. What are the moments where most of us seem to lose our emotional footing? I'll use those words.
Right.
Are there some sort of examples you can share?
Sure. I think they're almost...
And how to regain that footing?
There's categories of it. So one of the important categories is interpersonal. Right? It's very hard when you're facing someone. It's hard to fire someone. It's hard to give them a performance review. It's hard to tell them sort of where they're going wrong, or sometimes for some people where they're going right. Right? It's hard to have a difficult conversation in one way or the other. It's hard to bring up an undiscussable in a table full of people. So when I work with a CEO and their leadership team, one of the first things that I do is I go interview everyone and I figure out what the undiscussables are. What are the things that we're not talking about? There's this big issue in Europe. We're not talking about it. There's a problem with the product. We're not talking about it. There's an issue with quality, or there's an issue with sales. We're not talking about it. What is it that we're not talking about? Then I get everybody in a room and I bring those things up. And I make them discuss the undiscussables. And you could probably track the rising rate of a stock price based on the willingness of the leadership team to discuss undiscussables, right? It's that important. So I think that's a place, and those are two things. One is, am I willing to talk about things that are sensitive? But the question is, why wouldn't I be willing? And the reason I wouldn't be willing is because of how other people are going to feel. Because when I'm going to talk about the problem in Europe, the head of Europe is in the room. When I'm going to talk about the problem in sales, or the problem with quality, or the problem with a product, those heads are in the room, and they're going to get defensive. So it takes tremendous emotional courage to not get defensive and to actually think as a leader about how we solve that problem. It takes tremendous emotional courage to bring up the issue. Right? And so those are all interpersonal. There's also the business risk. So there's the courage that it takes for me to look at a situation and go, I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but I'm going to make a bet. And that bet is going to place money and resources and time and effort and focus on a particular opportunity or challenge that may or may not pan out, right? It's risk.
Right.
That's another area where emotional courage is really necessary. And it's also the emotional courage to look and be able to say, it's not working out, and I'm going to stop it, versus stay committed to it for so long that you end up destroying the business in pursuit of a dream that doesn't exist.
Right.
But it also is required, you need the emotional courage in order to be able to see it through even when it looks difficult. And how you tell the difference between those two, that's a huge challenge. And it's a challenge that requires the emotional grounding, right, to be able to separate out your fear of failure and your drive for success, to pull those back enough to be able to look at it and go, what am I actually seeing here? Right? That's all emotional courage, emotional grounding.